Hi, this is the Philosophical Angle program, and I am your host, Chris Angle. I'm the author of 4 books of philosophy, and they're known as the Detmar-Haskell Dialogues. And they are the nature of aesthetics, the nature of ethics, the nature of truth, the philosophical equations of economics, and the nature of the political left and right. If you'd like to make comment about anything you see here on this program, give us a shout at detmar.haskell, Haskell spelled with 2 L's, at icloud.com. And this week we're going to talk about New York City. And we're going to entitle it Socialism, Good or Bad for New York City. And as we know, a new mayor has been elected, and this mayor has espoused the benefits and goodness of socialism. In response to this, many businessmen and conservative pundits have forewarned that the travesty that could befall New York City if these severe socialistic policies of this new mayor are put in place. These policies seem to be the typical tenets of socialism, such as raising taxes, more welfare for all, and other typical socialistic policies. And we need to make it clear which side is right. Will socialism be good for New York City? Well, luckily you're tuned in to the Philosophical Angle program. So let's delve in and find out. So the first thing we need to do is to define socialism and free market capitalism by understanding their philosophical contents. So socialism is primarily the heavy taxation of profits of a private enterprise economy. And for this mayor of New York City, we're pretty much going to assume that he's going to try to raise taxes on the production of goods and services in New York City and distribute more welfare to his constituents who voted for him. Is this good for New York City? Does socialism work? Well, in order for us to understand whether socialism works, or that is, whether it is more efficient than capitalism, whether it is better than free market enterprise for New York City, or anywhere else for that matter, we're going to need to first define free market enterprise, and we're going to do it in an enhanced fashion, as the traditional textbook definitions will be inadequate. Once we establish our new enhanced definition of capitalism, then we can find out what the new enhanced definition for socialism will be. And then we'll be able to understand whether it has goodness compared to the free market enterprise. Let's begin. The enhanced definition of socialism, if we're going to first do capitalism, is comprised of several components. First, we recognize that the first principle of economics and life in general is that all life does that which is good for it, and does so on an ongoing basis. Secondly, free market enterprise has the component of freedom. And the nature of freedom is the ability of an individual entity to create a priority, which is a piece of knowledge, and effectuate that priority into a reality. In other words, if you want to go for breakfast in the morning because you're a little bit hungry, you create your priority in your mind to go down to the local deli and grab some breakfast. Next, in order to realize whether you want to effectuate a priority, you then have to make a transaction in your mind of the sacrifices involved with going down there. The sacrifices involved in going down to get your breakfast will be comprised of risk, the time, the information and knowledge, and the effort to be able to get down there. Also, it may require material in addition, such as a car. And once you go down there and you obtained the reward, the breakfast, which also consists of the risk, time, information, and knowledge, effort, and the material in making it, you'll now compare your reward with the sacrifice. In other words, is it worth it to go down there and get the reward at the store? And if the sacrifice is small and the reward is large, then you're probably going to most want to do it. And this is called the motivation inherent in all transactions. Then once upon establishing the priority, you then effectuate your priority that you created in the mind when you got up that morning by actually going down there to the deli and getting that desideratum by effectuating an exchange, also known as a market transaction. So now we have to add some more ingredients to free market enterprise because we live in a society, and all those entities that are producing goods and services often have the same priorities. This is called competition. So when you go to a store to buy something, others may want to buy the same thing, and if there are more people trying to obtain the same thing, the price of that product is going to rise. Simple economics. And so now we have to define competition. And competition is the convergence of priorities. If people have the same priority, or if their priorities have become similar, or if they're trying to obtain the same thing, then this is competition. But all entities know that competition is inimical to one's production of goodness for oneself. If in order to avoid competition, the life entity is then subject to the law of differentiation, which says that when faced with competition, life entities, companies, and corporations will try to diverge away by differentiating their products in order to avoid direct competition. In order to complete our enhanced comprehensive definition of capitalism, we have to add in cooperation, because often the priorities that we created in our minds that we want to effectuate sometimes turn out to be very complicated, and this effectuation of a desideratum, also known as a product, may require cooperation with other human beings in order to be able to produce the goods and services of an economy. So, there we have it, the enhanced definition of free market enterprise. It consists of the desire to do good for oneself, freedom, motivation, a transaction, competition, cooperation, and the law of differentiation. Whereas profit, you might ask, that is inherent in the reward side of the transaction. Remember, we make sacrifice to get a reward. So, to move on, in socialism, all the ingredients are just as they are in free market enterprise. However, they do diverge. A place where they diverge is in the effectuation of the priority within freedom and within the sacrifice ratio, or the sacrifice motivation ratio, because all life does that which is good for it when executing a sacrifice. If the value of the reward goes down and the sacrifice remains the same, then the motivation changes for the worse. And as the motivation becomes less and less, the production of goods and services will be less. The reason why motivation will go down is because if the government is going to take part of your reward, or should I say more of the reward than previously thought, then the motivation will go down and the production of goods and services will lessen. So now the question remains, is this good or bad for society to lessen the motivation of those within society that are producing the goods and services? A decrease in motivation will decrease the amount of goods and services produced. And we produce goods and services in order to bring us up from misery, which is the essence of all that is good. And so if we decrease our motivation, we also decrease the amount of goodness in society. And now a secondary question remains, is it okay to reduce goods and services in society, but using that extra amount of goodness that went to the government due to taxation will now be spread as welfare payments to those who are the needy in society? So is this not good for society? What's the answer? Well, now we know that socialism is inefficient to free market enterprise, but still the question remains, is it better to force society to have socialism, or at least a little bit of socialism? In other words, is it morally better for socialism to be with us in society, or is it free market enterprise that is morally better? Which is really the best way for society to operate? Well, some people say that there's a need for taking care of those who are less fortunate in society and cannot help themselves. These people need a handout or help or assistance in some way, and the government should provide it. And if we do that by taxing the outcome of the production of goods and services, then it's all the better for society. Others advocate for less intervention and for less taxes, and that the poor will take care of themselves eventually through providing a job for them in society. So where do we go from here? Let's tally up the pros and cons for both sides and see where it leads us. Free market enterprise provides more good in society through the production of goods and services, bringing us up away from misery, and is more capable than socialism because of the motivation factor. However, the idea of socialism is that it will provide goodness for those who are less fortunate in society additionally. However, in societies that promote free market enterprise, we find that these societies are more charitable in bringing an opportunity for the less fortunate in society. However, those who advocate socialism in society would say that charities would never bring enough resources to take care of the downtrodden and the less fortunate in society. However, those of the free market enterprise would say we can add in a little bit of socialistic programs to take up whatever gap remains between charity and a satisfactory level for the poor. But those who advocate free market enterprise can point out that free market enterprise produces a more ethical society. How is this possible? It's because free market enterprise introduces cooperation in producing goods and services, and cooperation is the vehicle and the means by which we are able to be ethical. Ethics is the appropriate dispensation of respect, and respect is the biological facet by which we are able to cooperate, and we cooperate to produce goods and services. So, the society that has the most cooperation will be the one that is most ethical overall. However, there'll be less corruption in society because of the Lord Acton. Not however, in addition to, there'll be less cooperation in society because of the Lord Acton's statement that power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The more you give power and control to a government, the more you're going to have corruption. And the more you have corruption, the more there is less will to cooperate by those who have been corrupted. That is, by those who control society. Therefore, A society must reduce its reliance on socialism as much as possible. Some would conclude that complete extermination of socialism is not possible, and that socialistic welfare programs are needed to take up the gap if charity is incapable of taking care of the less fortunate in society. So the conclusion is to let free society do the best job it can and let governmental socialism fill any gap that may persist at a minimum level to assist the poor. Yet, keep intact the motivational ratio to induce the poor to re-enter the workforce. Opening the spigot of more and greater welfare will destroy motivation for New York City and anywhere else. Thanks for joining us on the Philosophical Angle program. See you next time.